Welcome guys, I'll show you today how to get started off with Blender. So Blender is a free and open source 3D modeling software. So first thing you will do is you will navigate your way to www.blender.org. Now down here we'll click on download just up here and we'll click on requirements, and you guys can see if you guys have sufficient requirements to run Blender. Now I would go with optimal production grade hardware because I had 8 GB RAM and that wasn't sufficient, so I had to upgrade that. But it really depends on how big of modeling you are doing. So the more tris count you have, the higher RAM and stuff you guys will obviously need. Anyway, so once you guys have had a look here, we'll click on download again. Then down here you have a few options. So obviously if you guys have a Windows, go for Windows. If you guys have a Mac, go for Mac. Or if you guys have a Linux, go for Linux. You guys could also get the source code only if you know what you're doing. So and then once you've chosen which one you want, I would just go for the installer if you guys are doing it for Windows, and then choose a mirror. So just choose a mirror that's close to your country. I'll just go for NL1, and then it will start downloading the file. Now once your download has finished, you'll just click and open this. Then just next, accept the terms and conditions. Choose a place, click next, and then you will install it. So first time you open Blender, you will be greeted with this splash screen right here. Now on this splash screen, first of all, you guys will see what version you have of the software. Secondly, you guys have links, online links to donations, credits, or manual and stuff. And then you guys have any of the recent projects that you guys have been working on that you have saved. Those will show up here. And you will have one option to recover your last session. Now up here in interaction, you guys have three options. One is Blender default, and then 3ds Max and Maya. So the default navigation system inside Blender is different from those softwares. So if you guys have been working on one of these softwares, you might want to consider using one of these two options, which will change your controls. In this video, I will be showing you the defaults for Blender. Now to get rid of this splash screen, you guys will just click anywhere on the side. Now I'll show you guys how to navigate your way around your scene. So first thing you'll do is we'll press the middle mouse button, and you can move around your scenes to all sides. Now the second thing you can do is you can press shift and then the middle mouse button and then drag your mouse left, right, down and up. With this you can drag your scene around, and then you can press control and use the middle mouse, go forwards and backwards. This will kind of zoom in and out your scene. You can also use the scroll wheel, forwards to zoom in, backwards to zoom out. And then next we'll look at how to change your view inside this. So for this, you will be using your number pad. So 1 for front view, 3 for side view, and 7 for top view. And then control 1 for back view, control 3 for right view, left view, and control 7 for bottom view. Now right now these lines aren't exactly aligned very well. So for this, what you guys want to do is press 5 on the number pad to go into orthographic view, which is really useful if you guys are trying to get the trying to align things correctly with these lines. And then the next thing we can do is, so I'll move away. We can obviously right click to select objects, left click to move our middle mouse cursor, and shift C to make it go back in the center. Now the next thing you guys can do is on your number pad, you guys can press the dot key, and this will frame your selected object into view. Whichever object this is, when you press the dot key, this will frame dot, or a period I suppose, as you guys call it in the US. I call it dots or full stop. So this is the key you guys press to move to your object to frame your object into view. Now if you want to frame everything you have in your scene into view, you press the home key, and this will bring in all your objects in your main screen. Now the next thing you can do is you can press shift. I'll actually turn on screencast so you guys can see the keys down here. So you guys can press shift F, then you guys have this first person camera mode. You can move your mouse around. You guys can move around using WASD. Just can press shift and then use WASD. You guys will move slightly faster. And to get out of this mode, just press escape. Now as I showed you, if you guys left click somewhere, this will be your new point where whenever you add something it will spawn here. So if you guys accidentally click on the side, just do shift C and it should go back in the middle. Now the next thing we'll look at are these drop downs. These drop downs are available in all of your windows and they all have similar options, but you guys can choose different ones for each. And as you guys can see, all our windows have this option right here. So this gives you the free access to whichever window you guys want to open. Depends on what task you're trying to complete at a particular time. For this we'll be looking at our main viewport screen, and we can change the options down here. So first you have your 3D view, which is your default viewport, and then you have some timeline and graph editors. These you can use to make things like animation and all those things. And next thing we have is the UV image editor. If you guys click this, you guys can unwrap your objects here to textures. You guys can paint colors on your textures and stuff. You guys can make normals and everything. And this will assign those things onto your object. This will tell the computer where those things go on your object. And then the next thing you have is the video sequencer. Now this is quite self-explanatory. You guys can edit videos or a movie clip editor. So these things can be quite useful once you're in the animation and the rendering stage. And then you have the text editor. You guys can make a new file. You guys can type whatever you want. Make record of everything you're doing, type things, just keep track of your progress. Just click this this cross down here, then unlink to remove that. Now the next thing we have is the node editor. Now the node editor is you can use this to for things like materials and stuff, so this can be quite useful. And then we have the logic editor. Now here you guys can program your game. Now Blender is capable of modeling, doing animations and making games, but I prefer doing a lot of my stuff inside Unreal Engine, and I only use Blender for the modeling side of things. So this is it. And then you have the info tab, which is your main menu bar up here, and then you have the outliner, which is down here. We'll cover these things separately. And you have the Python console where you guys can edit. You guys can do various stuff. If you guys know Python coding, you guys can use it here. You guys can make the system do things for you, and this can be quite useful if you guys know what you're doing. Then I'll just go back to our 3D view, which is the default. The next thing we'll look at is the info bar right up here. So inside File we have the basic options like opening a new project, opening one of the older projects you have worked on, opening any of the recent projects you have been working on and you have saved, or recover your last session, recover autosave, save your project. And then the next thing we have the user preferences. Now if you click these have a lot of options inside them, so you guys can edit your interface, the font sizes and everything, and you guys can edit a lot of stuff here. Now inside the input, you guys can add manual keys, hotkeys for every single thing you do, and hotkeys are really important inside Blender. So it's always good to always practice with hotkeys. It's a good habit to have. It will save you a lot of time. And inside add-ons, these add-ons, some of them are really useful. You guys can obviously get extra add-ons online. They are all free, and this can be really useful for making trees and landscapes and everything. And then themes, you guys can change everything down here. You can change the colors you see, the text type, the fonts and everything. And then inside File, you guys can choose where your files are saved and everything. And System. Inside System, you guys can choose different things like what type of rendering you do. Do you use your CPU or do you use your GPU? You guys can play around these settings if you guys think these would be helpful for you, and whichever works good for you, I guess. I did a lot of experimentation with these things, and I'm happy with the result I have right now. And then the next thing you guys have now inside Blender, you guys can import many different file formats. If you guys are working with let's say Unity or Unreal Engine, FBX is the format you want to export normally. You guys can obviously use all the other formats like Wavefront, OBJ, Stanford Ply, so you can import and export as various different file formats. And then you have the quit option down here. This can also load factory settings. If you guys mess up your settings, you guys can just click here and it should go back to the default as when you first had it. Now inside render, you guys can render your image. So if I click render image right now, it will open a new screen with this rendered image. So it shows you different things like lighting and just gives you a nice result of what it will actually look like inside an animation. Now the difference between render and OpenGL render is the OpenGL gives you a preview, so it's less expensive to run. So if you have a really complex scene, you want to might just want to use the OpenGL just to preview your render image or your animations and stuff. So you guys can make animations, render animations and images here. It can be quite expensive. I like to do all my rendering inside Unreal Engine for this reason. Now window, you guys can duplicate window, and as you guys can notice, everything has a hotkey. So it's good to take these hotkeys into account and practice with them. You guys can make a screenshot of your current window, make screencast, so you guys can record here. You can record your screen, and then in help you have all your manual and stuff. You guys can access your main splash screen, check the manual. So these are all the online links down here. Next thing we'll look at are these screens, so you can call them templates down here. Now the default is obviously your main screen that you guys will see normally when you start a Blender. So first we'll look at the 3D full view. So what this does is this will give you a kind of a rendered view that you can move around. It will take away any extra things in the scene like lights and cameras and everything. And then the next thing we have here is animation. So this will open up what you need to animate your stuff, like the graph or the dope sheet summary. I won't go into these too much. I don't really use these a lot, but this is these templates you guys can use. They can help you out a lot. Now the next one we have is the compositing. Now this will open up the UV image editor and the node editor and your main mesh. So you guys can use this to add textures, do materials, different materials, use the nodes to do all those things. Then you have the game logic. Here you guys can make notes here, so you can plan your game here and then program your game down here, and you can see anything in your scene down here. So this can be quite useful if you guys are making a game inside Blender. Next one we have is motion tracking. So this is used with the movie clip editor. So this can be useful if you guys are working on your movie scenes and your motions and everything. Then the next one we have is scripting. Now here you guys can obviously make notes again, and down here you guys can use Python scripting to automate to tell Blender what you want it to do for you. And then the next one we have is the UV editing. Now UV editing is quite simple. It just shows you your mesh on one side and your UV image editor on the other side, where you can unwrap this to this and then assign textures onto your object. Now the last one we have here is video editing. So if you guys have made some animations, you guys have added some movement and stuff, you guys can edit your videos here. You guys can record and stuff down here. Next thing we will cover is our scenes and our engines. So you guys can have multiple scenes inside inside one of your projects. So to add a new scene, you guys just click down here at the press key, and to remove it, you guys can press the cross key. So this allows you to make two scenes inside the same project, and to so if I make one right here, just click new. Now we have scene 1 and scene. So you just click on the drop down and you guys can navigate between these two scenes. And then if you want to delete it, just press this cross key right here. Now next thing we have is our engine. So we have 3 engines down here. First one is the Blender render. Now the Blender render is it is the default you guys will start out with, and it can do a bit of everything, so it's quite good if you're a beginner. This is probably the best one you want to use right now. And then you have a Blender game. Now Blender game has slightly different settings. All of them have slightly different settings to the other. So Blender game can be used when you are making a game and you want a lot of functionality to be added to your game. So you guys can use Blender game for that. And Cycles Render. Now Cycles Render has an amazing node system. So if you guys do manage to learn nodes, and it gives you a lot more accurate results. But it's also slightly more expensive to run than Blender render. So Cycles Render is really good if you want to get accurate and nice looking results with a lot of options in the nodes. If you guys do want to do all that, the Cycles Render is the one for you, but Blender render is slightly simple, less expensive to run as well. So I normally just use Blender render or Cycles Render. I've never used Blender game. So you guys can have a go depending on what you guys want to achieve. So the next thing we'll look at is our toolbar right here. So this you can press T inside your scene, and this will disappear. You press T again and this will appear again. So you can toggle the visibility of this using the T key. Now first we'll look at tools. Now translate is the same as moving. So the shortcut for that is G, and then you have rotate, which is R, and then scale, and then mirror. So these are things that are self-explanatory and the names speak for themselves. So you guys can press join. Now if you take your mouse over any of these, you guys can see the shortcut for these keys. I will demonstrate them for you guys. So if I select this object right here, so if I press G, I can grab the object and move it around, and if I right click, I can place it back down. If I press R, I can rotate the object. Now there are a few tricks you guys can use. So for example, if I press R, then I press X, now it's selected the X-axis for me. Now if I type 90, it has rotated the cube 90 degrees when I press enter. You guys can do these things. You guys can press S, X, and then type a value, and it will scale by that much. So R, X, Y, and Z. You guys can use any of the axes and combine them with these, and you guys can this will really speed up your process by a lot. And then next thing we have is set origin. So for example, if I left click down here, and then I can do Control Shift Alt C, and then set origin to 3D cursor. Now my object origin has moved around here, so now if I rotate the object, it will rotate around this origin, this new origin. If you want the origin to go back to the center, now obviously left clicking down here is going to be really hard, because it's really hard to get it right in the middle. So you can just press Shift C and it will go in the middle. And then Control Shift Alt C, or you can just go down here and origin to 3D cursor, and this should move in the middle. Now the next one, we have shading. Now to explain this to you guys, what I'll do is I'll press Shift A, I'll add a sphere, and we'll move this out. Now as you guys can see, it's really easy to see all these that this surface is really flat right now, and it doesn't look very smooth. So in shading you guys can click smooth, and now all of a sudden it looks like it looks pretty smooth, looks pretty good. And if you want to go back to the other mode, just can press flat. So this helps rather than having like I don't know, thousands of faces. You guys can manage with like 500 faces, and then just click smooth, and you have the same surface. It's kind of a rough same surface, smooth surface, than you would have with thousands of faces, which is really expensive to run. And then we have some of the data transfer down here. And in history, this is the same again. This is the basics. You can undo and redo, and then check your undo history and repeat what you have done. So same keys, Control Z, Control Z, and then Shift Control Z to redo. Now inside Create, we have these options down here. So the second thing you guys can use for Create is Shift A. So Shift A is the hotkey for Create. So you guys can add planes, you guys can add cubes and stuff, you guys can add curves and sunlights and text and armature and lattice. So all these things you can add into your scene. You guys can do Shift A. And another thing that's really useful is spacebar. Just type spacebar and just type anything. And this is so useful. You won't believe how useful this is. If you guys know what you're looking for, but you don't know where to find it, just press spacebar and then type. For example, if I'm looking for a sphere, just type it and then I can add a UV sphere right here, or any sphere I want. So spacebar really important. So this is where you find all your objects. Obviously Shift A to also bring this up. And then relations. You guys can make groups between different objects. So for example, the hotkey for this is Control and G. So if I select this and then I shift click this, now I can press Control G, and when they turn green, it means that they are in the same group. You guys can name your group here. So right now let's press Control Z to go back, and then you can set parent. So if I set parent right now, right here, the object. Now this has been parented to this, so now when I move one, the other will move too. But when I move this one, that one will not move. So you guys can make parents and children for objects, which can be quite useful at times. So you guys can also link data and make local and make proxy for the selected objects. And then inside animations, you guys can insert keyframes down here. So this is the timeline that you guys can make. So at this time, this thing. So if I want this cube to move down here when I play the animation, I'll add a timeline and then move this cube. So during the timeline, the cube will move from here down to there. And then you just now calculate motion paths, take action. These things can be useful if you guys are doing your animations. Now physics. Now in this, you guys can change shapes and calculate masses, and this can be useful to mess with your gravity and stuff and all these things. I don't use these options a lot. I just use this software to model, but just to show you guys what these things are. And then grease pencil. Now grease pencil, you guys can basically click on draw. You can choose a continuous drawing first. You can just draw out a random shape, whatever you guys want to draw. If you guys don't want to model it from scratch, just draw it out. And then down here you guys can do convert, and then convert this to maybe a path or something. Now you guys can press tab, and now you have this selected right here. And now you have a natural mesh that has been, like vertices that have been made from the shape you made, the original shape. You just press delete to delete this. Use the erase tool to remove this. This can be quite useful. You guys can get bases for a shape. If you guys are good with drawing with your with the mouse, you can use this to draw stuff. And this tool can be quite useful. Now I don't remember if this was default. I think some of it was default and some of it I'm using an add-on. So if you guys don't see this, don't worry too much. It's fine. Now the next thing we will look at is our specific properties down here. So we can use the N key to make this appear. So toggle the visibility and the visibility of this thing right here. Now these options will change depending on what you are doing. Some of these will remain, but some of these options will change depending on what you have selected and what you are doing in your scene. So so let's say you have your basic mesh selected in the middle. So in this case, what the options you will see here are things like locations. You guys can type a random value for location, and this will move down here. Or if you move this value will change. So you guys can do the location, the rotation, the scale, and the dimensions down here. And the next thing, you have your grease pencil options, which we have down there. And you can change your lens, which you can think of as your field of view. So the more you move it back, the further away it goes from your scene. And then you have the clip distance. Now your clip distance is, if I show this to you, if I turn this down to 100 maybe, or maybe 10. Now you will notice that your scene, your grid has started to cut out from the scene. You guys can, if you guys have a really large scene and you want to see all of it, you guys can maybe do like 1000 of this, and you guys can see all your scene. So this can be quite useful if your scene is being cut out. If your scene is really big, you guys can change this value down here. And then obviously this is the location for your 3D cursor, which you can also move around with your left mouse button. So you can use Shift C to make it go back center, or you can just type 0, 0, and 0 down here, and it should move back to the middle again. Here it's gonna show you your item, the item you have in your scene right now, the item you have selected. And then in your display you guys can change your settings like only render, or change your world background, change the origins of all your objects. And then the next thing we have is shading. Now shading you guys can use to maybe use ambient occlusions. These I don't really use these options a lot. I don't know if they're very useful, but I've never tried them. You guys can play around with them to see if you like them. So for example, you guys can hide the back faces, cull the back faces of your objects, use textures on your solids and stuff, and then motion tracking. This is to do with your movie clips and stuff. Now you guys can also add background images, so you guys can click this, add image, and then you guys will have some images down there. Now the thing I'm using down here, the screencast keys, now you guys won't see this because this is not default. I am using an add-on for this. So what this does is if you guys do want to record for YouTube, you want to do videos and tutorials, this is useful because any key you press, like if I press A or S, it will show up down here, so your viewers can keep up with exactly what you're doing. Now down here we have our operator panel, which is part of this. So if you press T, for example, then our view can make this appear and disappear, including this. So now what you guys can change here is these are very specific options. So to give you guys an example, I'll delete this cube. Now if I add let's say I go to mesh, shift A mesh, and then add a sphere, I can choose the settings to do with the sphere down here. So I can change how many segments it has and change how many rings it has, and this you can reduce and increase these. So these can be quite useful. So you guys will find these settings here for any new objects you add or any editing you do. And then obviously up here you can check your current version, how many vertices you have in your scene, how many faces and trace count, and how many objects you have right now, and lamps, and how much memory you're using, and what type of object you have selected right now. So these can be really useful because once you guys do get into game development or something, you guys want to really watch out for these values. These values can make a difference between a great game and a bad game, and these will greatly influence your FPS along with textures and many other things like particle systems. This trace value or the faces, these are the two values you guys want to watch out for. Now the next thing we'll look at is our main region right down here. So first we will look at view. Now as we covered earlier, in the number pad you guys can use all these keys to change your perspective, your view, which side you look at your scene or your objects from. So, and then you have this, and then we have some properties and some tool shelf here, which is the T and the N as we covered earlier. And then you can toggle full screen. You guys always want to make sure you know the hotkeys for this. It's a really good practice to know all the hotkeys. It will save you so much time, as I keep mentioning. And then you can toggle maximize area, quad view, duplicate into a new window, playback animation, view all, view selected. There's a lot of good options here you guys can use. Now inside select we have some selection options down here, so we can select the linked. So if we have something selected, we can select any objects or materials or textures linked to that object, or any particle systems linked, or we can select any groups that we have made already, or we can make any groups down here as well. And then you guys can increase how much you select by pressing the plus key, and reducing how much you select by using the minus key. Then select camera and mirror. So all these options can be used for selections. Now one thing I will show you guys right now is I will show you some selection methods inside Blender. Now first thing I will show you is pressing A. So we can use the A key to select everything or deselect everything. And then we have C. So if you press C, you can use the scroll wheel to make the selection larger or smaller. Now if we click with C, left click, we will select anything inside the C and right click to get out of the circle selection mode. And if you press C again and press the middle mouse button, we will deselect. So left mouse button to select and middle mouse button to deselect. And then the next selection I'll show you guys is called a lasso select. I don't know how to say that word, but here we go. So we hold Control and then use our left mouse button and just drag as much as we want to. So Control and left mouse button and drag, and you guys can select as much as you want. It's more of a free select tool. And then to deselect, you guys want to press Control Shift and then left mouse button and just drag around. And now you have deselected all of these things. And then we have Add, which is obviously the same as Shift A. You just can use Shift A to add anything, or add anything from down here. It's the same things. Now inside objects we have a range of options like joining objects, some of which I have already shown you. Control J to join objects together, P to remove objects from a selection, make proxy, delete. So you guys will find all those options here with their hotkeys, with their keys that you can use as well down here. Now next we have our modes down here. So I will cover all of these modes one by one. So first one we have down here is our object mode, which is a default, the default mode you guys will have. Second we have is edit. You guys can press tab to get into edit mode or out of edit mode. And then and then you can obviously press Control tab to go into weight paints. Now the edit mode, you guys can manually edit each of the vertices. Just press E to extrude and add more vertices to it. And if you select this one and some other vertices by shift and right click, you just can press F to fill them together. If I select all three and press F, we will fill this in completely. So tab is something you guys can use to mess around, edit stuff and everything. And then next thing we have is sculpt mode. Now sculpt mode gives you the ability to sculpt out objects and change many options here. You can add stuff, remove stuff. You guys need to be careful because some options add so many vertices that you might crash Blender. So you have to choose the options carefully. You guys know what you're doing, and you guys can add shapes and edit this. As you guys can see, it's increasing size, but right now it's not really adding any more vertices or anything. So you have the sculpt tool here. You guys can manually sculpt anything you want. And then we have the vertex paint. Now the vertex paint can be used to assign areas. So I recently found out, thanks to someone who commented on one of my videos and told me how to use this. And this can be quite useful in using vents to assign to tell the system where you don't want vents. So this area, vents will not affect this area, but this area vents will affect. So vertex paint can be used to tell your system where you want something to happen and something not to happen. And then you have the weight paints. Now inside the weight paint, you guys can tell it how strong you want something to be. So for example, if I was to use a particle system on this, now the red area is where all the particles will show up. So if I'm using a mesh or hair, this is where all the hair will show up and this is where it will not show up. So this tells the system, and this also tells it how much you want of it. So if I do subtract, and now you guys can obviously choose how much of it you want as well. So if it's like yellow, it won't be as extreme. If it's green, it's very mild. If it's blue, it's nothing. If it's red, you want a lot of it down there. And then you have the texture paint. You guys will need to use the UV image editor and add a manual texture. You guys can paint textures on here. And then if you go back to your object mode, the next option we have down here is these. So you guys have different options. You guys can go to rendered view, which shows you how your lighting affects just your area and how it will actually look inside your scene once the whole scene has been rendered. You guys can use Shift Z for this to get into and out of this mode. Next thing we have is our material, which shows you if you have any materials on your object, like different colors and stuff. So for this, you guys can just go down here, go to material, and then we'll go back to solid right now. Next we have is our texture. So this shows you if you guys have painted any textures on this, or added any images on this, any shapes, once you have unwrapped this. Then you have your solid mode, which is the default that you start off with. Then the wireframe mode, you guys can use this, is see-through, so if you guys have any object right behind it or right inside it, you guys can see it this way. And you guys can also use this with the edit mode. You guys can use wireframe with the edit mode, which can be quite useful to select things inside this. And then we have the bounding box. Now the bounding box is different from the object. So no matter what shape your object is, the bounding box is usually straight, and this can be quite useful. Now the next thing we have is our pivot points. So you guys can choose where you want your pivot points. If I click down here and I go down here and click on 3D cursor, our pivot point has changed to the 3D cursor now. And you guys can obviously change it back going down here and changing it to pressing Shift C and moving your 3D cursor in the middle, and now your pivot point is moved back in the middle. So you guys can change those settings here, and then down here you have your pivot point. If you want to disable your pivot point, just click down here. You guys can choose the move tool, the rotation tool, or the scale tool, and you guys can choose how it affects your object, whether it's some global, local, normal, or view. Now the next thing we have is our layers. So you guys can have more than one layer, and each layer can contain a different object. So this can be useful if you guys are trying to make different objects and you don't want to use the same scene, you want them all in the middle. And you guys can use the 1, 2, 3, all these keys to go between the different layers. The dot in the middle tells you if there's an object present inside the layer that you are looking at. If you guys want to move an object from one layer to another, what I'll do for this is, if I press M, I can just choose a layer. If I choose 2, now our object has moved into this layer. To move it back, just press M and then choose the first one, and it goes back into the first layer. Next thing we have is our proportional editing. Now this, so you can press O to turn this on, or these options down here, and you can affect how it affects your I'll just give you an example. So now if I want to drag this down up here, I can make the circle bigger. Now if I move this, all the other vertices will be affected as well. If I make this smaller, only some of the vertices will be affected. You guys can use this to make something like a nice flower petals to get nice smooth shapes. So if you edit one vertex, all of them will move and change. And then you have some more snapping and rendering options here, or rendering your image and rendering your So OpenGL, as we talked about earlier, is a cheap previewing, which is less expensive, which you can use down here. Now the next thing we'll look at is our outliner tab right here. So I'll drag this on the side to make this bigger and drag this down. Now inside our outliner tab, so anything you have in your scene will show up down here. You can search here for anything. If you guys have a lot of objects in your scene and you want to search, you guys can type here and the thing will appear. So you guys can also disable the visibility of these things. For example, if I select this cube right here, you can see it's here. Just can double click to change the name, and if I click on this eye icon, the cube will disappear, and if I press again, it will appear back in again. And then you have this this mouse tool right here. So if I click this, and then now I can't edit my cube at all. So I can't select it, I can't move it, I can't do anything to it. So this can help if you guys want to just leave something along the side. Just press this and it won't, like, you can't edit, you can't do anything. And if you don't want something rendering with the rest of your scene, just click down here and your object will not render. So and then all your scenes will be down here as well. So you'll have scene 1, scene 2, as many scenes as you have will show up down here. And you can obviously choose options on what you want to show down here as well. So if you guys just want the current object that you have selected, you guys do this, and it will show you any of the selected objects in your scene. And now the last thing we have down here is our properties tab. Now inside your properties, these can change depending on what object you have selected and what type of tasks you are performing at that current time. So first we had the render tab. Now you can render an image down here, render animations and audios. And this will show you how your scene looks. There's a lot of settings down here that you guys can play around with. Then we have our scenes, so we can have more than one render layer. You guys can choose which scene, which layer you guys want. So all these options are down here. And then you have your scene option right here. Now down here you guys can choose your camera, your background, your active clip and your units. So if you guys are working with, let's say, Unreal Engine or Unity, you want to change this to metric and change this value to 0.01. This will make the scale the same as Unreal Engine and Unity. You can also now, since it's clipping, and as I mentioned this earlier, if it starts to clip, I'll just type here 1 kilometer, and now it is no more clipping, and this is the default for Unreal Engine and Unity. And then you have your world. So inside your world you can add a real sky, you can do a lot of cool stuff. You can add a real sky, you can change the background colors, the horizon color, the ambient colors, add lighting and direct lighting. So all those options, you will find them here. Then you have the options for your cube. So something that I've selected right now, you can do all these, change all these settings right here: rotation, scale, location, change it into move it to the two different layers, choose the names, and all these options you will find here. And next you can set constraints down here. So constraints are things like, let's say you want to limit the rotation or the scale of the object. You don't want it to rotate anymore, you don't want to scale anymore. So you guys can make those constraints down here. And then we have our modifier tab, where you guys can modify your object, generate new things, deform your object and simulate your object. So all these things can be used to make for things like reducing the tris count. For example, if you use decimate, you guys can reduce the tris count. If you guys are making, let's say, a plane, now the plane is going to do the same from both sides. For this you guys could use mirror, so now anything you do on one side happens on the other side as well. Then you guys can make like water and ocean and all cool stuff down here, smoke. So this is your modifier tab. And then we have this this option right here for the data. Inside here you have like vertex groups and texture space and shape keys and UV maps. I'll give a quick description of each of these. Now vertex groups. So these can be used to assign like where you want something to happen. So this information tells the system where you want a specific thing to take place. And then your shape keys. So these shape keys can be used to do things like growing a plant. You can also you might also know them as move targets. These things can be used like that. And then the next thing you have is UV maps. So UV maps is your unwrapping and everything, your UV image textures. Then you have a materials tab. You guys can add new materials to your object. You guys can change the colors down here and everything. And this is how you do that. Then you have your texture tab. You guys can import textures from the outside or use any of the textures you already have inside down here. Now the particle system can be used to simulate a lot of things, make hairs, make fur, or just put meshes around your object and specify things, or make really cool effects. So you do all that here. And then this is your physics tab, where you can enable physics for things like gravity, collision, or force fields and everything. So this is it, guys. Thanks for taking the time to watch this. I hope you guys found this useful. I will attach a list of useful hotkeys that I use quite a bit in a file in the description, and they will also be in the article on my website, which will also be in the description. I won't use every single aspect of Blender, but I will be doing more tutorials on Unreal Engine 4 and Blender. So I'll be using both to ultimately, hopefully, make a third-person game. So if you guys want to keep up with that, please subscribe, and you guys will receive notifications every time I post a video. So this was it for now, guys. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you next time.